Welcome to Deafblind Scotland's online classes as part of the Just Keep Going project. Deafblind member Anne will instruct you step by step to make your very own art project.
Hello everybody and welcome to COVID Crafts on behalf of Deafblind Scotland. I'm a member of Deafblind Scotland and I'm bringing to you today some ideas for making gifts for your loved ones, friends, birthdays, Christmases, whatever, because we've all been stuck in here in lockdown. And I've been shielding and I wondered how could I utilise items in my house and make something nice to offer as a present. And I came up with the idea of papier-mâché dishes. That's paper mâché to you and I if you don't speak French. And today we're going to make a little bowl. And I'm going to start off by showing you the equipment that you need and how to handle the equipment and some tips and tricks to make this as easy and as pleasant and as enjoyable a task as possible. First of all, you need a flat surface, preferably a table at a comfortable height because you'll be sitting here for quite a while and you don't want to get a sore back. And on that table, just put a bin bag or a piece of plastic, a plastic tablecloth will do, to protect it because we will be using glue and it can get a bit messy. On top of the bin bag, I have then placed 2 plastic sheets which are very wipeable, and then the items we're going to be working on, because we have to move this placemat, which is actually a file cover, we have to move this with the items on it to a corner of the room whereby we can let it dry overnight. And it's also got to be a wipeable surface. So this is just covered with cling film in order that you can wipe it. For our paper mâché bowls, we want to end up with a shape and a design something like this. But your bowl and your design will be personalised to suit yourself or your loved one or whomever you're giving it to. So what we need first of all is newspaper. I don't read the paper personally, but I got neighbours. Take your folded newspaper and take a pair of scissors and turn the newspaper on the side so the fold is away from you. And the reason that is so that the paper doesn't flap open if you're cutting away from the paper, and it'll flap at the other end and you might not be able to cut it clean off at the edge. And what you need to do is create rectangle stamp sizes which will be then glued and pasted onto the shape of your bowl. I suggest that you cut the paper just roughly, you don't need to measure it, either 1 finger's width or 2 fingers widths. The 1 finger's width paper will be for the smaller areas that you need to cover on the bowl, and the 2 fingers widths will be for the bigger areas that you need to cover on the bowl. I will cut 1 strip just to show you. I have got the loose edges towards me and I'm just roughly cutting it 2 fingers widths apart. I won't cut any more because I've already got some that I have prepared. Take your newspaper with the fold in whichever hand you're most comfortable with. Lay it on top of your plastic work surface and then find a dark, preferably a black, thick pen for high contrast. And what you're going to do is you're going to draw a line across each strip of newspaper, and that is so that when you're putting the newspaper with glue onto the bowl, you'll see whether the newspaper is going on horizontal or vertical, because you have to layer alternate layers horizontally and then vertically on your piece. So there's a pen. I am drawing a line straight across the paper. I'm opening it up the way you would open a book, one strip at a time, and I'm drawing a line, in my case from left to right, on each strip of newspaper. And when you have done that, you close the newspaper up, ready for cutting. To save time, I have got one I've prepared earlier. Hold the paper firmly in your hands so it doesn't all cascade apart with the lines drawn. You will need a small bowl and a larger bowl. The small bowl is made of plastic, so if any glue gets into it, it washes. The larger bowl is covered in cling film, so that if you do dip into the larger bowl to get paper out of and glue gets onto the bowl, you can just take the low cling film off it, throw it away and wash the bowl as usual. Now I've already cut small strips. I've done these about 2 or 3 finger widths in length. That's my small strips. So I just roughly work it out where my fingers would be and then cut, and straight into the bowl, and cut straight into the bowl. If you want the bigger strips, which we certainly do, you take your bigger bowl, because that helps you to recognise straight away that big bowl equals big strips, little bowl equals small strips. And what you do is you just take your scissors approximately 4 or 5 fingers in length, right along, and just judge it and cut into the bigger bowl. And when you come to the folded edge, instead of trying to open it up and everything, just take your scissors and cut off the folded edge, and you've got the loose bits of paper. So you now have 2 bowls, small strips, big strips. Once you've done that, put the scissors safely away to one side. Once you've done that, you get PVA glue. You can get it in small tubs in the pound shop, or you can get it in B&Q or some of these hardware shops. I always have PVA glue in the house. It's made of a plastic and it is washable. It's often used in schools with children, so it's relatively safe to use. I have a large tub of PVA glue, which I got for about £3 somewhere in one of the pound shops just before Christmas time. And what you do with that, you've got to mix it half PVA glue and half water. It's as simple as that. No fancy recipe, it's just half and half. And it must be stored in an airtight jar, otherwise the glue will dry in and you'll not be able to open the lid of the jar. So what you need to do is get some kind of jar that's tightly sealed. Get someone to help you measure. I have a safety ruler here and it's calibrated in old-fashioned inches. And what we did was we just measured 1 inch, then 2 inch, then 3 inch against the side of the jar, and I drew black long lines, and that meant that you could judge just how many parts of glue were going to be mixed with 1 part of water. So my guide and I, we measured this and then we put the big lines, and in between I've put smaller lines halfway up. So if I just want to measure 1 inch worth of glue and water in this jar, approximately is enough to make one bow. You pour the PVA into this and then add the water, but what you must do is make sure you take a cloth or a rag and always wipe round the surface, because if you don't do that you'll not be able to get the lid off very easily. It's always best to have all your tools to hand, and then preferably in the order that you're going to use them. Now for this particular lesson, part of the lesson, what we will need is cling film. I've got my kitchen roll of cling film, a ruler, preferably one that's got a grip like a safety ruler, which is like a W in shape if you feel it. You need a dark coloured pen, a marker pen. You need an airtight jar, maybe a food jar that's been cleaned out. You need a clothes peg. You need a stirring stick or an end of a paintbrush or an end of a spoon that you can use for stirring. You need PVA glue in a normal bottle size, or this is a tub that I have. You need scissors. You need 2 plastic bowls, one bigger than the other. You need newspaper, and you need something that's going to act as your mould for your actual gluing. So now that you've got the PVA mixed up, what you need to do is pour some of the PVA into a bowl. But remember, you've got to be able to wash the bowl out at the end of it. So if you have a utensil that isn't washable, you would need to put cling film wrapped around inside the bowl just to protect it. But because this is made of a Pyrexy type of oven-proof material, it does wash very well. So what I will do, I will pour some of this into the bowl. And the reason we don't just use the PVA straight from the jar is because you can't get your hand right in the jar to dip the pieces of paper into it that you need to make the paper mâché. So it doesn't matter how much you pour in here, but my tip is to just pour approximately a couple of finger widths worth of glue into it. Then what you have to do is wipe it, and I'll get a tissue out of here to wipe it, to wipe the edge of the bowl, because if you don't do that, the lid will stick to the jar and you'll not be able to open it. Make sure you've got plenty of wipes to hand or a damp cloth. So now I have my jar, I now have my small bits of paper, I now have my large bits of paper. This is the shape that I'm wishing to use as a mould for my paper mâché. So in order for the paper mâché to not stick to the mould, we have to cover it in cling film, because PVA does not stick to cling film. It must be made of a similar plastic material. You must start from the outside of the bowl by placing the bowl in the middle of the in the middle of the cling film, and then just fold your cling film into the bowl. That's one layer. I strongly advise you use 2 or 3 layers. And don't just cover it any other way, because you're actually going to need the centre of the cling film to help you to pull the mould away from the paper mâché. So that's why That's why the cling film's folded into the centre of the bowl, because you're not going to put any paper mâché in the centre of the bowl, it's just going to be on the outside of the bowl. Just for good measure, I'm going to give it 3 layers. Be very careful when you're using a cling film dispenser, because it's so easy to cut your hands on the sharp knife at the edge of it, and then put it away safely out of harm's way, so you don't accidentally lean on it or put your elbow into it. So now that I've got the cling film quite firmly round the bowl, and then smooth the bowl round with your fingers, just so that there's no bubbles in the cling film and it's quite smoothly adhered to the outer edges of the bowl. Our next step is to begin covering the bowl with newspaper. Now, to start with, you're not doing the insides, you're doing the outsides, and don't forget to do the base. What we need is 2 sticks or 2 straws or 2 paintbrushes. In my case, I've got 2 plastic pens because they wash, and I am using these to put onto my work surface so that the bowl is raised up, so when you're putting glue, when the glue starts to drip off the paper, it all just doesn't drip into a big puddly mess and you can't move the bowl round. So the bowl is now upside down on the sticks, which are acting like a kind of plinth, but the air and everything can get underneath the bowl and round the edges. So what I'm going to do is, because the bottom of the bowl is narrower, the surface area is narrower than the sides of the bowl, I'm going to start off with small bits of paper. And what I do is I take the bowl and actually put it on the covered work surface, because as you're dipping the paper into the glue, you don't want it dribbling everywhere that you can't wipe. I also take my glue and I put it on the work surface quite near me. Try to be very careful that you do not knock the bowl over. So I take first bit of paper, or I take 2 or 3 or 4, and I just put them onto the work surface. So I'm not constantly going into the glue, the paper, and then putting the glue into the bowl and maybe gunging up all the bits of paper together. So you take what you feel, to try and make sure it's one piece. And for this, I'm going to go horizontally. So do you remember we drew lines on our bits of paper? I know that this paper is horizontal because it's the first layer, it's easy, and the line is going from left to right. So I dip the paper into the glue, and I turn it round and dip the other end of the paper into the glue, and like in the fish and chip shop, when they batter the fish, just take your fingers and run off the excess glue back into the bowl. And you take your paper and you lay it on the middle, left to right, and just smooth it down. Now the glue will run down the side of the bowl, don't worry about it because it's easily cleaned up. You repeat this process till you've covered the base of the container, the base of the bowl. And when you've covered the base of the bowl, remember you've got the edges going down the side of the bowl. So what you have to do is continue with your small bits of paper and just put some going, not all the way down, but just one piece of paper from top to bottom round the curve of the bowl. If I hold this up, you'll maybe be able to see what I mean. It's going down the curve of the bowl. See there, it's a bit short of the curve, so you're going to put paper making it go down the edges. Just like putting on a hat. Oops, I've dipped my fingers into the bowl. That's a crime that you shouldn't do. So I've turned the bowl round and I'm just putting the paper down round the curves. And when you've done the bottom of the bowl, your hands do get very messy. I've used gloves to do this, and I've also done it barehanded. And to be quite honest, I prefer it barehanded. So you're going around the edges of the bowl just like as if you were drawing petals on a flower, radiating out from the centre. So it's going down the sides. I've just got a little bit there to do, and then we're ready to do the sides of the bowl. Don't worry if a couple of bits of paper get dropped into the glue. They'll just be all the more gluey for you to fish out later on, one dropped in. Remember to wipe from top to bottom to get the excess glue off. And when you're putting these layers of paper on, please try and overlap them slightly so that they're forming a bond with each other. A bit like a kind of jigsaw puzzle, but an overlapping jigsaw puzzle. So that's me done the base of the pot, the first layer. Now we're going to do the sides, and for that I'm going to take the bigger strips of paper because they'll cover the area. I'm trying to go in with dry hands, and I'll put these big strips of paper to the other side of my workstation so that I'm not going to get them muddled up with the small bits which I've got out. So I've got the longer strips, same idea, going top to bottom. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them vertically down, radiating out from the base down to the rim of the upside down rim of the bowl. So the lines are going vertical. Now that you've covered the bottom, you've got to start working down the sides, and use the larger strips of paper, and you start going vertically from the base of the bowl down to the rim. And you know that you're doing it vertically because the black line is pointing from top to bottom. Same thing, dip it in the glue, wipe the glue off, and then pat it in, overlapping to the strip next to you. If it's the first strip, then that's fine, but the second strip needs to overlap onto it. And you work your way round until you have finished covering the walls of the bowl. And when you've finished covering the walls of the bowl, what you do is your hands will be covered in glue, but they wash. We're not made of sugar, as my granny would say. Will not melt. Bit of water wouldn't do us any harm. So you try and pat down the edges. If you find that there are little gaps, what you can do is either take another bigger strip or take some of the smaller strips and try and patch in. If you find that there are parts that are not overlapped. And once that's done vertically, because it's the first layer, I normally do 2 layers and let it dry overnight. But because it's the very first layer, I am just putting, I'm just laying 1 layer down and leaving it to dry overnight. The next time I'll lay 2 layers and leave it to dry overnight. And there we have it. You clean your mess up by washing your hands, taking the whole work surface and wiping it down with cloths or an old rag or paper towels, but something wet is best to dissolve the glue. And you take your pens or brushes or whatever you've used as a plinth, make sure you wash these thoroughly, because if you don't, they will stick to the bowl that you've been making. And once you've cleaned up your work surface, then you can put it safely in a corner to dry overnight. A minimum of 24 hours for the first layer. And that's all, folks, till we start again on part 2. Thank you.